Let's shift gear a little bit. I'm going to talk about something very much related to self-concordance, but from a different angle. I'm going to talk about values in action, or in short, the VIA. Values in action, the VIA, is arguably the most ambitious and certainly one of the most important projects within positive psychology. It was initiated by Chris Peterson, in the picture, professor at University of Michigan, and Marty Seligman. And what they wanted to identify was positive psychology's alternative to the DSM. The DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, which is essentially the classification of all known mental disorders. It's a very thick book, a very important document where it says, for example, it lists certain criteria, and it says if a person has 7 of the 10 of these criteria for X period of time, that person has major depression. If the person has 3 out of the 4 criteria for Y period of time, that person has schizophrenia, or dysthymia, or seasonal affective disorder, or all of the psychopathologies that are known to us that have been defined and classified. A very important document. Come along Seligman and Peterson right at the beginning when positive psychology came onto the scene and say, let's create an alternative. Let's create an alternative to the DSM that will identify, instead of weaknesses, instead of pathologies, instead of deficiencies, it will identify individual strengths and virtues. And they identified 24 character strengths, all listed, explained, described in this book. Not only did they identify the character strengths, they also created mechanisms, ways, means of measuring these character strengths. For example, an online test, one which you will be taking next week, that can help you, as a first step, identify your values in actions. What are your character strengths? What are your virtues? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? The thing about these character strengths, when they identified them, they made sure that they identified universal characteristics. In other words, it wasn't chosen by, male, white, academics living in America. This was research done all over the world, cross-culturally, to identify characters that are identical, whether it was in the United States or Europe, Asia, China, Japan, as well as the Maasai tribe in Kenya and the Inuits in northern Greenland. So this was an international research project, because what they thought, if we can find things that are common to all cultures, we will identify what is part of human nature as opposed to human nurture. And they admit, these may change over time, we may become more sophisticated in measuring them, but as a start, the character strengths and virtues, the values in action, manual and test, is an excellent start, and one which you will benefit from a great deal, as you will see shortly. The key aspect also of these characteristics is that they have a moral value. For example, the ability to run fast. It's certainly, some people have the strength, having more fast twitch than slow twitch, having stronger muscles, for instance. It's certainly a strength, but it's not a character strength, because it doesn't, in and of itself, have a moral component. You can use your strength and your speed toward moral ends, but in and of itself, it has not been valued as a moral characteristic. Similarly, in order for something to be a strength, it has to be used toward moral ends. For instance, as you will see, humor is one of the character strengths. However, if humor is used to hurt other people, as it sometimes is, it cannot be considered a strength. So it's used toward moral, noble ends. What values in actions are, in many ways, they're about a self-concordant journey. Meaning, when we set a goal, an outcome, we're about the destination. Yes, it certainly benefits the journey. Yes, it certainly helps us enjoy by liberating us, helps us enjoy the here and now. But ultimately, what our focus is on the end result. With values in action, our focus is on specifically, directly, the journey. How can I enjoy getting to the end, my destination? Is it by engaging in a lot of learning? Is it by, which may be a character strength of mine, love of learning? Is it by engaging in leading other people? Leadership is one of those character strengths. Is it by being spiritual and praying along the path? If spirituality or awe is one or my character strengths. So it's helping us enjoy the journey on the way to a destination we deem valuable. In other words, if we have a self-concordant end and a self-concordant journey, this is what happiness is. Both present benefit, journey, as well as future benefit, outcome. And that's why it goes hand in hand with a self-concordant goal. It's not that self-concordant goals don't help us enjoy the journey, and it's not that VIA does not help us enjoy, reach a better outcome. It does. However, when they go together, we're more likely to experience a complete experience of happiness, of fulfillment. And a lot of research has shown how identifying our values in action and, more importantly, applying them, using them, exercising them, leads to higher levels of happiness and success. And this is not just correlational, there is a causal relationship. And your exercise for next week will be to implement it, which will ultimately, hopefully, lead to more success as well as more of the ultimate currency. In addition to the questionnaire that you will be taking, here are some other criteria to identify what are your personal character strengths. The first one is this the real me? Do I feel authentic, most myself, when I'm working in a group, when I'm leading people, when I'm learning something new, when I'm praying, when I'm watching a comedy or telling jokes or listening to jokes? When do I feel most myself? William James, back in the 19th century. I've often thought that the best way to define a man's character would be to seek out the particular mental or moral attitude in which, when it came upon him, he felt himself most deeply and intensively active and alive. At such moments, there is a voice inside which speaks and says, "This is the real me." When is the real you coming out? Is it when you act bravely? Is it when you apply yourself and work hard at something? Is it when you plan and you're prudent, careful about the future? That's a strength too. When you are acting according to your character strengths, you feel energized and you feel motivated. It comes from within. It feels natural. Again, this is about understanding your personal nature, the constrained view of human nature, as opposed to saying, well, all the strengths are me, or I can cultivate any of the strengths. Yes, it's true, and we all have some of all of the strengths. However, we also have certain inclinations embedded, whether it's in our genes, whether it's in our early experiences, and it's not that we cannot or should not cultivate the other strengths, but what we need to do is focus mostly on those strengths that are most natural to us, because that's when we get the most bang for the buck, so to speak, in the ultimate currency, that is, as well as in success, the conventional standard of success. And when we engage in those strengths, our personal strengths, that's when we grow the most, that's when we develop the most, that's when we learn the most. And again, ask yourself, as in a minute you'll be looking at the list of strengths, ask yourself, when does it feel the real me? Again, is it when I apply myself and work hard? Is it when I go against the grain and act bravely? Is that when I feel the most real, the most alive? Is it when I learn something new? Is it when I go to a museum? Is it when I pray? Is it when I'm around people who are funny? When is it the most me? Here is the list. Take just a minute to look at them. They're divided into 6 categories. There are 24 character strengths. And I just want you to be exposed to it right now because, again, for your homework, you'll get a printout of all these strengths with a description. Just take a few seconds to look through them and ask yourself, who are you when it comes to these strengths? Okay, here is what we're going to do. What we're going to do now is I'm going to introduce you to 2 exercises. 2 exercises that build on the VIA, that build on this questionnaire, that build on your identifying your personal character strengths. The first exercise you're actually going to be doing, that's next week for your response paper. The second exercise is one that I highly recommend doing. For lack of time, we can't also do that. The first one, and this is based on research done by Peterson and his colleagues, has been shown to have remarkable effects, remarkable consequences in terms of well-being as well as in terms of success. And what it is about is building capacity. It's about identifying the character strengths and then pursuing them. Just a quick recap about what it means to build capacity. You see, when you're thinking about character strengths and applying character strengths, what we know is that it helps you become happier. Remember, a self-concordant journey. So if I'm doing something and am constantly engaged in learning new things, if it is my personal strength, or expressing gratitude constantly, if that is my character strength, something that I'm inclined to do, I will be happier. In other words, going back to our model from the 2nd or 3rd class, it will help us go from the 0 to the positive. However, what was found in this research is that it doesn't only help us go from the 0 to the positive, it also helps us better deal with the negative. This it does directly. This it does indirectly. How? By building capacity. And if you think about it, this is what positive psychology is about, as we've discussed numerous times. It's about building capacity. It's about strengthening our immune system, making us more resilient, or the other analogy that we use, building a stronger motor, so that we can better deal with hardships, with uphill battles when these arise. So cultivating our VIA directly affects our journey. We enjoy it more, from the 0 to the positive. And then it does something else. It also helps us build capacity so that we are better able to deal with the negative, with the difficulties, with the hardships when these inevitably arise. So here is the process. The first step is to identify your character strengths. Seems pretty obvious. The way to do it, 2 steps, 2 sub-steps. First, to take the questionnaire, to take the test. This is the website. It will all be emailed to you, plus it's on your, it's on the PowerPoint. To take this test, it's 240 questions, should take you about 30 minutes, and there are no right or wrong answers. It's not like it's better to have all in your top 5, and not so great to have prudence as your top 1, which, by the way, is my top value. There's no good, bad. it's identifying who you are. And all of them, again, we all have all 24. You know, I think gratitude is my 19. Now, does that mean that I don't enjoy being grateful? That the gratitude exercise that I do every day is not beneficial to me? Of course it is. But much higher for me is the love of learning. So take the online test, identify from there your 10 top ones. They recommend top 5. I recommend anywhere between 8 and 12. And then take these 8 to 12 strengths, read their descriptions, what they mean, what they're about, what they say about you, and then ask yourself which ones, which 5, or it could be 4, or it could be 6, but more or less 5. Which 5 fulfill the criteria that we discussed earlier? Namely, which are the real me? Or which ones, when I engage in them, I feel most energized and motivated? Or which ones do I grow and develop most from? And from these 8 to 12 strengths, identify 4 to 6 that most fulfill these strength criteria. And then choose any one of the character strengths from your final list and apply it. Meaning, every day for the following 7 days, and again, this will be your task for next week, apply this character strength. Every day for the 7 days after that, that will be up to you, and hopefully you will cultivate a ritual, a habit out of it. Apply the next character strength or the same character strength in a different way. So let me give you a personal example. The third time when I taught positive psychology, about halfway through the semester, I started to feel a little bit enervated, a little bit tired. You know, I've done it twice before. I knew what I was going to say. I've heard myself say it before. And I felt like I lost a bit of energy and a bit of oomph in teaching. And then I went back to the VIA. And I said, well, that makes a lot of sense. Because my second strength after prudence is love of learning. And when I was teaching the same course, again, I wasn't learning that much new. So yes, I had new learnings in office hours. I always learn a lot. Those who have been to my office hours know that I jot down ideas as we're speaking. But as a whole, in the class, I was doing the same thing. And then I said, okay, so I'm going to engage in this exercise. And for me, that exercise was, let's take love of learning and continue it even when I'm teaching the same course. And I'm incredibly busy, even if I'm teaching the same course. But I still put an hour aside every day to learning something new, to reading something that I haven't read before. And what that did for me immediately, within 2 days, it brought back my energy. It had a trickle effect on other areas, such as my teaching, because I was reading something new, and then it also helped me teach better, not only in terms of energy, but also new ideas. You know, such as I introduce once in a while. Sometimes I tell you, I just read this book, and here is what I read. And I do it constantly, even though I'm very busy, because I know that that's important for well-being, for the ultimate currency, as well as for success, for performance. So applying whatever it is, whatever your top strengths are, consciously until it becomes a habit. And then, this will also be part of your exercise, each night describe how you use your strengths on that day, and then commit to the next day. What are you going to do tomorrow? Why? Because that reinforces the neural pathways. Remember when we described something good. In many ways, the VIA to the DSM is like PPEO to PTSD. Remember that could be a GRE question. The analogy is PPEO, positive, PTSD, negative, is the same as the VIA compared to the DSM. The equivalence, positive psychology, and conventional psychopathology. So here is a second exercise after you do this. You can also apply it for problem solving because, in a sense, while the VIA indirectly builds capacity and helps us deal with problems, with difficulties, with uphills, we can also use it to affect our difficulties or to help us with our problems directly. So, for example, the first step, same as the previous one. You first identify your character strengths by taking the test, by asking what are the criteria that these strengths fulfill, and then identify any problem, whether it's in personal life, whether it's on the sports field, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's at work. Identify a certain problem that you want to deal with. And then ask how you can apply one of the character or some of the character strengths toward that problem. So, for example, let's take an example. Let's say one of the problems that I face is that I'm mostly avoiding. I'm afraid of taking risks. I don't put myself on the line because I'm anxious and afraid. And love of learning is one of my strengths. What I can do is use the love of learning to deal with my phobia, my anxiety, my fear of putting myself on the line. How? By learning all I can learn about how to better deal with phobia and anxiety. Which, by the way, is exactly what I did. Read every book I could find, talked to any person who I thought knew about it, used this strength and applied it to what had been a weakness of mine. Or relationships. Let's say we're going through a difficulty in a relationship, and one of my top strengths is, for example, authenticity. Then how can I use my authenticity in my interactions with my partner, and that will lead to higher levels of intimacy and improve the relationship in the long run? Which is exactly what I did. One of my top strengths, and applied it to cultivating more intimacy. Think of your own examples. Again, this will not be a response paper, but I highly recommend and urge you to apply it. Let's put some of these ideas together. Let's look at the decisions that some of you are making right now or will be making in the future, whether it's next year or 3 years from now or 20 and 40 years from now. How do you make a decision, and what may be a helpful framework for identifying a self-concordant journey as well as outcome?